Welcome back. It's the 29th Phyllis Schlafly Collegians Summit. We're so grateful to have so many super guests, and we framed the conversation as you're watching this. A lot of times people will watch each of these segments around this quote from Patrick Henry. "The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It's to the vigilant, the active, the brave." That comes from the March 23rd, 1775, "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. Our next guest is a friend of mine for years now, Armstrong Williams. I think, Armstrong, you would be known as an entrepreneur for people that know your business work. You'd be known as a commentator for people that watch you in the media. I think you had in your past, you were a political, advisor. You still do that some. So you wear a lot of hats, and as we were just saying, you spend your time going to lunch with me where I talk about my family and my kids and all. So you're a counselor. So first of all, welcome. But I want to ask you a specific question about this moment in American life, where we're watching a show trial on Capitol Hill. We're watching the media as dishonorable as they've ever been, in my opinion. You may disagree. And the politics as divided as ever, I think. Is that where we are?
Well, first, thank you for having me as a part of this. I knew Ms. Schlafly, incredible human being, and much respect for you and what you do. You know, are these times any more special and more challenging than before? And I would say no. I think this is the struggles and the challenges of democracy, when democracy continues to move forward with the winds of change. I think sometimes we forget that America is a very young country at a very tender age. If you look at other great empires that have survived over time through chaos, through wars, through famine, through viruses, you know, these things test our resolve. It tests our character. I think sometimes we like to prescribe everything to policy, everything to the White House, to the legislature, to the judicial. But I do think there is a spiritual illness that is often ignored and not talked about. I think what reflects all of us in our ideology is what informs us, what informs our decisions. Some people can say family, some people can say the books that they've read, the mentors or whatever. But I think virtue still matters. I think character still matters. And while we see all this chaos, it's something that America can survive and become better. I think it makes us take a closer look at about who we are. I think what is so unique about this time, which is so different than any other time in history, is that the loudest voices, the minorities, they seem to dictate our laws. They seem to dictate our culture. It's as if the majority doesn't matter anymore. Whether it's the Proud Boys, whether it's Antifa, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's those people who don't care to understand that politics change, and sometimes Democrats are in power, and sometimes they can control the Supreme Court, and sometimes the pendulum swing the opposite. Right. And so it's what democracy is all about. But I think what separated the Founding Fathers from so many other things, they had this great faith in God. They had this great faith in liberty, this faith in freedom in the individual. And I think sometimes what we want to do is assign this group thing to everyone, and where we our voices are sort of dismissed, and everything is about the minority voices, which really doesn't represent the culture that who we are.
If you're a college student today, and you were South Carolina State, is that where you went? Yeah. South Carolina State, 100 years ago. When you were a college student, though, it's different than today. In today's college student, they're faced with this social media. By the way, one of the college kids said they watch Armstrong Williams has a Facebook Live, does those Facebook Lives. I've been on with you, and you know, you do your TV show, the Armstrong Williams Show, nationally syndicated. You're a communicator. These college kids who we're talking to in this summit, they're informed by the speed of TikTok, right? The speed of Instagram. And it's almost, by definition, exhausting. And I don't know. I mean, I hear what you said. What I don't know is how you build virtue in that space when it feels like big tech and big media are mostly interested in action and clicks.
Yeah, but for our generation, when you have a strong two-parent household, when the church and was the most important institution growing up, when your father and your mother's examples were always the examples that influenced you the most, when you were taught that you should read the Bible and you should read C.S. Lewis, Mere Christian, or you should read Marcus Aurelius, or you should read Plato, or you should read Shakespeare, or you should read Harriet Beecher Stowe. The one thing about that the Bible teaches us, it says, raise a child in a way. You teach them the righteousness. You teach them right from wrong. You teach them virtue. And while that child may go astray, there will be those things that you speak of that would influence them. That child will always find their way back home. But what is happening now, teaching moral education, teaching belief, teaching about God, teaching there's a higher purpose to life, really has been pushed to the side now because man, as I said, the minority, these voices, want to move that as to say it doesn't matter. It's all about us. It's about this immediacy. It's about this microwave mentality. I want it now. There's no delayed gratification. And so social media, yeah, while they're overwhelmed by social media, because you believe they're media now. You believe they have the structure in place, they have the character, they have the integrity, they have the fact checking, but it's not that. They want clickbait. They want people to watch. They want likes and dislikes. And we live in a society today with these young people. Their self-esteem comes from whether someone likes or dislikes them.
Exactly.
And that is very shallow.
Yeah, but it's very real, right? It's happening. It's one thing to say it's shallow. It's another thing to say it's happening. And now pull back for a second about society. You said family structure and all that kind of stuff, which I agree with, of course. But we are where we are, and how we got here. A few hours ago, Congressman Burgess Owens was here, and he was talking about how the education system left behind so many people. He was describing actually before integration, there was black community that was succeeding in ways that after integration, as integration occurred, which he wasn't arguing against, of course, he said the school system, though, didn't get better for the poorer kids, and it trapped them. I guess if the toothpaste is out of the tube, what do we do now?
Look, I believe this. I believe what we see in the headlines, what the media reports, is only a fraction. I believe most people are still good. I believe that most people believe in strong values. You know, people like to say, when you look at President Biden's poll numbers, and he's at almost a 70% disapproval rating, they like to say this is about Republicans and conservatives. It's not about Republicans and conservatives. It's about independents. It's about Democrats. It's about people that don't like the direction of the country. They don't like this transgenderism being pushed on them. They don't like these drag queens going into the classroom on Read a Day and influencing their kids 3 and 4 or 5 years old when they're impressionable. They just don't like what they're seeing. Now, the media may conduct these polls, and and a lot of this stuff is corrupt and is pushed by a special interest group. But Americans know that virtues and values still matter. Just like I saw the Washington Post finally came out today with an article that said what we already know. We've known from day one. They don't want transgender women who are biological males playing in women's sports. To most people, that's just common sense. Right. It's just it. People have common sense. And eventually, as the clock swings, people like to say that Biden's disapproval ratings is because the Trump supporters. No, it's not. Americans joined to say your immigration policies, what you've done with the Keystone Pipeline, all this climate change and environmental at the expense of us are no longer all interdependent. This mindset where you allow them to defund the police, while you may not have said, I support this, you said nothing. Right. You allow this on your clock, and all of a sudden, you're trying to will this back. Well, you cannot will this back because you and Pelosi and Schumer said nothing. And even these hearings that are going on where former President Donald Trump is being accused of inciting this violence, I mean, if you're going to accuse Donald Trump of the same, you cannot absolve Chuck Schumer for doing the very same thing. And what he said, standing on the steps of the Supreme Court, he called out Gorsuch's name, he called out Kavanaugh's name, and he said you would pay. And look at what has happened. You've had a judge's son, you had a judge who was killed, and you had an attempted assassination on Kavanaugh. If you're going to hold Trump accountable, you must also hold Schumer accountable. So Americans see the double standards. And guess what? Americans don't care. They care about their pocketbook issues. The gas pump, food,
Right.
baby formula. These are the issues that Americans care about. And you can talk until the cows come home, and the media can be the biggest cheerleader for Biden and his policies, but it's not working.
On a college campus right now, the woke police are off and out, right? And so here you are, one of the most successful media entrepreneurs, right? You own TV stations and is very successful. You have a nationally syndicated show for a long time. You've written a column forever too, written books, and you're an African American. And I was thinking about Phyllis, the late Phyllis Schlafly. One of her proudest things, and it was in the documentary, Clarence Thomas's The Unequal, that documentary. There was a moment where Phyllis had gathered a bunch of the Eagles to stand in the hallway when Clarence Thomas was on his way to the hearing, and they were cheering him on. He always remembered it. They had this great rapport. But Clarence Thomas, another friend of yours, Ben Carson, these men are vilified for being black. And if you're on a college campus and you're not aware of the way they play the race card, how do we get past that?
Well, I don't think they're being vilified because they're black. They're being vilified because of their ideology, their thinking process, the fact that they don't necessarily embrace the civil rights mantra, they don't embrace the affirmative action mantra. They believe in this thing you call capitalism. They believe a person should work for a living, that you should not have a child unless you have the capacity to care for that child. They believe that both parents, if possible, should be in the household. They believe that you should preserve a life in the womb, that somebody has to protect that life. And so it's the value system that they condemn. I don't make much about race. I say this, and it shocks people when I say this. I've never experienced racism in my life. It's never impacted me. I've never can say, I'm in the broadcast business, I'm in the real estate business, we own hotels, and I can tell you I have been in every scenario where it should have been possible, where I should have been denied, I've been slighted. I've never had that experience. I have
Really?
not. And we should not assume just because someone is black that they're discriminated against, just like I should not assume because you're white that you've not experienced racism. We just cannot make and put people in those boxes. People disagree based on ideology and what you believe in. It has less to do with race. Because if I believed what Ben Crump believed, if I believed what Al Sharpton believed, I would be a hero. I would be celebrated. I would be on the cover of magazines and newspapers. But my ideology, because I don't conform, they vilify me no more than they would vilify you because of your conservatism. Liberals don't vilify you because you're white, if they happen to be white. They vilify you because of your ideology. We want to make everything about race. And it's really not about race. It's about the battle for the soul of America.
But what about 1619? When the New York Times rolls out the 1619 Project, when the Pulitzer Prize, or I think they gave the woman a prize, she gets a tenured professorship at Duke. I mean, I know that's ideology. Oh, North Carolina,
yes.
Sorry. I know that's ideology, but it's also a way to make things about something that they're not.
Well, they're pushing an agenda by the liberal elite, where they feel they know what's best to advance the education of what they call minorities in this country. When you look at Baltimore and you look at the failing school system and you look across this country, and it's sad to say that so many minorities are failing in this educational experiment.
Right.
Instead of holding the schools accountable and the teachers accountable and the administrators accountable, it must be about race. It must be about, because when they read the textbooks, they don't read anything about their history. They don't see themselves in these textbooks. And so that must be the reason. I will tell you, you can teach them all the history you want to teach them, but unless you teach them math, English, writing, science and history, that stuff becomes irrelevant. That is not going to get you a top-notch job, whether it's in engineering, whether it's a lawyer. You can be a lawyer, but at some point, you've got to have real skills. Race does not give you a skill, okay? It does not.
Right. Does if you were 22 today, graduating college, where would you look for opportunities?
You know, listen, that's an interesting question. You know, I have been blessed. You know, I don't like to say that my life is any special. You know, I grew up with two parents in the household. I did not grow up poor. I grew up in a very affluent household. A lot of people like to think that people sometimes who look like me, my stories are rags and I struggle and poverty. None of that was my experience. And it's unfair to believe that Americans who happen to be black, who happen to become successful, their bio is about poverty. I had good parents who worked hard, who taught me what work ethic was. You know how they taught me? Because I saw it every morning. We were up at 4 and 5 a.m. in the morning. I saw it working the cattle on the farm, working the swine on the farm, working the chickens on the farm, working the tobacco on the farm, from sun up to sundown. As the Bible said, a man should work by the sweat of their brow. They taught me what hard work meant. I understood why there was food on the table. I understood why there were clothing on my back. I understood why when I graduated from high school, my parents were able to give me a 4-year education that they paid for out of their pockets, even though I had scholarships. They paid for the education of any child that wanted to go to school. You had to get good grades, you had to have discipline. And so I understood why all that happened was by my parents' hard work. So one thing I learned, if you want something in life, you got to work for it. Because when someone gives you something, they control you, there are strings attached, and you're not really free. Right. So my parents, fortunately for me, which seems to be sort of like a foreign language today, that say that you loved your father. Obviously, you're going to love your mother. But my father was my best friend. He was my hero. And even though my father is deceased, the values and the virtues that he imparted with me still live. They never die. Now, we may go astray, but what he taught me will always be there. I learned how to work, and I also learned that character was important, that integrity was important, that you don't cheat your way through life. And they also taught me some other simple things, which is very interesting. And this is because of my parents. I've never in my life ever tasted any kind of alcoholic beverage, beer, wine. Never tasted it. Never smoked any kind of cigarette, ever been exposed to any kind of drugs, ever. Never used one word of profanity, ever in my life. It is not because of me, it's the example that I had growing up, out of the respect that I had for my parents. Because sometimes when you engage in alcohol, you engage in drugs, sometimes it leads to other things you cannot have control over, and it leads to trouble. So I have never been one to follow the crowd. I always believed that my parents loved me so much. Even though I may have rebelled, I didn't like what they were always telling me, I never doubted they loved me and had my best interest. So I chose to listen to my parents, even to this day, and not follow the crowd. And that has worked well for me.
Yeah. Wow. I think you need to write a memoir. Have you written write another memoir? You got no time, I guess. You got no time. All right. Armstrong Williams, go to armstrongwilliams.com. His TV show is The Armstrong Williams Show, syndicated across the country, and also on Twitter at @ARightSide, and on Facebook. Whoever one of my collegians said they were following on Facebook with the Facebook Live videos every morning or every
morning at 8 a.m.
8 a.m. Yeah, so if you want to go in there, you get an earful like you just got here. So.
No, listen. There's no secret to success, and there's certainly no secret to failure. Anybody can fail. Anybody can do that. Anybody can do bad in the classroom. Anybody can have a baby out of wedlock. Anybody can commit a crime. Anybody can steal. But the long game is restraint. Some people just don't see the value in sacrificing a lesser good for a greater good. Because when you steal, you have that immediate reward. You rob someone of their good. When you lie, you have that immediate reward. You rob someone of their truth. When you cheat on your spouse, you have that immediate reward. But the true reward is the long game. I'd rather sacrifice the lesser good for the greater good in the long. And so, as my mother used to say before her death at 91, I want my best days to be my last days. And so life is pretty good, but it's what you're willing to sacrifice. And if you're not willing to sacrifice, you're just not going to find yourself having the peace, the joy, and the blessings that God promised you. Because he said he would bless you. He will pour out his prosperity upon you and bless you abundantly if you do certain things.
Yeah. All right, Armstrong Williams, everybody. Track him down on his Facebook Live, 8 o'clock every morning. Thank you, Armstrong, for being with us. We'll take another break and we'll come back. It's the 29th Phyllis Schlafly Collegians Summit. Still got a lot more coming. I'll be back in a minute.